Hello, friends, and let's get started.
It was raining outside the window, giving the illusion of a cozy home. But there was something more in the air, tension and anticipation. Alex, her husband, sat in his favorite chair, relaxed, but with a slight spark of excitement in his eyes. He and Lauren had always been the kind of couple their friends envied, the perfect team to talk about anything. But tonight's conversation promised to be special. "I've been thinking about something," Alex started, leaning forward. His tone was soft, but it only made Lauren more anxious. She looked up, scrutinizing his face. "Sounds serious," she replied with a smile, trying to hide her nervousness. Alex twirled the spoon in the coffee mug thoughtfully before continuing. "We always try to think of something to keep us from getting bored, right? Role-playing, spontaneous trips, even that boat date last month." He grinned. "But I was thinking, what if we tried something a little more unusual?" Lauren frowned, tilting her head interestedly. "Like what?" Alex paused, as if thinking over how to formulate his thought properly. Then, lowering his gaze to the mug, he said, "What if we tried partner swapping?" Her breath hitched and she froze, stunned by what she heard. Alex's eyes rose to hers, and she saw in them a strange combination of curiosity and uncertainty. "Are you serious?" Lauren asked, her voice sounding a little higher than she expected. "Why wouldn't I be?" Alex shrugged, trying to look casual, but his slight smile was giving out. "It's just an idea. We'll set the rules, be completely honest with each other. It's just a game." "A game?" Lauren couldn't hold back a nervous chuckle. "Alex, that sounds like something out of a bad movie. But isn't that what we've always done?" Alex got up to move closer to her. His voice became quieter, almost conspiratorial. "We're always looking for new ways to stay interesting to each other. This isn't about love or betrayal. It's about us. It's about trust." Lauren stared at him, feeling her thoughts muddle. Alex talked about it so calmly, so logically, that it confused her. He stood in front of her, tall, confident, and she couldn't help but remember how, in the 10 years of their marriage, he'd always been able to convince her of the most seemingly crazy schemes. "But this, how do you envision it?" she finally asked, trying to pull herself together. "We just find someone? And what then?" Alex smiled, as if he felt that the ice had been broken. "For starters, we can try to find a couple we feel comfortable with. It won't be spontaneous. We'll talk it over." He knelt down in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Lauren, this shouldn't scare you. This could be our new adventure. We'll take it slow. This is something we'll do together." She sighed, feeling his words sink deeper into her mind. Alex had always known how to find her weak spot, her hunger for novelty and her desire to keep their relationship as vibrant as it had been in the beginning. But this step seemed too big, too risky. "We have to be honest," he added, looking into her eyes. "If anything seems wrong, we'll stop. Everything is consensual. You're more important to me than anything else in the world, Lauren." She looked away, staring at the rain outside the window. Her heart pounded, and her thoughts raced like drops on glass. Lauren knew Alex wouldn't have suggested it if he didn't think it would strengthen their bond. But could she trust herself? Would she be able to handle this experiment? "Okay," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "We can discuss this further." Alex smiled, squeezing her hands tightly. "That's my girl, my Lauren," he exclaimed with relief. But despite his joy, a storm of doubts still raged inside her. Could their marriage stand the test? Or had they opened a Pandora's box that would change everything forever? It had been months of searching of new partners. Lauren nervously adjusted the neckline of her dress as she stood in front of her bedroom mirror. It was getting dusk outside, and the lights of the houses were beginning to reflect in the windows. Alex was noisily opening a bottle of wine in the kitchen, his voice cheerful and confident, overriding her anxious thoughts. Tonight was their first step into a world that had seemed something completely foreign before. Emily and Nathan were due any minute. Alex had met them at a conference a few months ago, and their common interests in traveling and gastronomy had quickly made them buddies. However, what they'd agreed on at dinner last time added a whole different connotation to this visit. "Is everything ready?" Alex looked into the bedroom, holding 2 glasses in his hand. "Relax, Lauren. It's just a meeting." She nodded, trying to smile, but her heart was beating too fast for it to look natural. You're right. It's just weird. She picked up her glass and took a big sip. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Alex opened it with such enthusiasm, as if it was old friends, not a couple they were preparing to spend such an unusual evening with. Lauren followed him into the hallway, feeling a slight shiver run through her body. Emily looked like she had just stepped off the cover of a magazine. Shiny brown hair, a bright smile, and a dress that emphasized her figure. She hugged Lauren as if they had known each other for a long time. Nathan, on the other hand, was reserved. His tall stature and broad shoulders made him imposing, but his quiet, almost secretive demeanor appealed even more. His voice, deep and smooth, seemed to penetrate to the very soul. "It's nice to see you again," he said, extending his hand to Lauren. "Likewise," she replied, feeling the warmth of his palm and the slight, electric pulse of their touch. At dinner, Alex and Emily quickly found common ground, talking animatedly about their travels and favorite restaurants. Lauren, feeling a little superfluous, caught Nathan's gaze. His eyes, green with gold speckles, lingered on her a little longer than she expected. It was more than politeness. She could feel it. As dinner drew to a close, Alex suggested that everyone move to the living room. Emily, laughing, agreed, raising her glass. "Lauren, you're an amazing hostess," she said, sitting down next to Alex on the couch. Lauren only nodded, her attention fully focused on Nathan, who had taken the chair across from her. They exchanged a couple of phrases that gradually grew into a lively conversation. His voice was steady and confident, and the more he spoke, the more she felt herself losing control. Nathan was not like the men she usually socialized with. There was a reliability in his mannerisms and an underlying strength that drew her like a magnet. At one point, when Alex and Emily were discussing another joke, Nathan leaned toward her quietly. "You look tense," he said, his voice barely audible to the others. Lauren felt her mouth go dry. "A little bit. New experience and all that," she replied, trying to sound calm. Nathan smiled slightly, a spark of understanding in his eyes. "I understand, but if anything seems uncomfortable, just say so." His voice sounded as if he really meant every word. Those words, simple and almost mundane, somehow made her feel protected. Lauren realized that she was finding it increasingly difficult to remain indifferent to his attention. As the evening went on, the conversations became more and more explicit. At one point, Emily raised her glass of wine, looked at the others with amusement, and said, "Well, how about we add a little pepper to the evening? Let's play a game of real candor. The questions can be anything you want, but the rules are simple. Answer honestly." Lauren tensed slightly as she felt Alex squeeze her hand encouragingly. "Why not?" he said enthusiastically, putting his arm around her shoulders. Nathan smiled silently, looking at Lauren as if he already knew her answers. This only increased her anxiety, mixed with a strange attraction. Emily was the first to ask a question. "Lauren, have you ever fantasized about two partners at the same time?" The room suddenly seemed too small. Lauren pretended to consider the answer, though her cheeks were starting to blush. "Maybe a couple times," she admitted cautiously, lowering her gaze to her glass. Emily clapped her hands together happily, and Alex grinned. "I didn't think you'd admit it so quickly." Nathan leaned forward slightly, and his voice sounded low and confident. "What are these fantasies? Did you dream them?" Lauren felt her breath hitch. She furtively looked at Nathan, but his face remained calm, almost studying. "Yes, there were dreams, but I don't think that's an interesting topic to discuss," she tried to say, hoping that would be enough to get her off the subject. But Emily wasn't going to stop. "Come on, Lauren, it's very interesting. It's only a game." Alex cheerfully picked up on it. "We agreed to be honest. Come on, honey, tell us." Lauren coquettishly sipped from her glass to give herself time to collect her thoughts. She wanted to say something neutral, but the feeling that Nathan was watching her intently threw her off balance. "It was just images," she said finally, feeling her voice shake. "All vague, but so damn exciting." Nathan kept his gaze on her, and Lauren felt something inside her shudder. But before the conversation could go any further, Alex accidentally touched his glass. The red wine instantly spilled onto the light-colored couch, leaving a huge stain. "Shit," he exclaimed, grabbing his head. Emily jumped up to help, and Nathan got a towel from the kitchen. Lauren remained seated, watching the scene as if from a distance. Her thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of what was going on inside her. Attempts to save the couch dragged on, and the mood of the evening had clearly soured. Emily sighed, looking at the huge wet spots. "Well, I guess that's a sign we should go." Lauren walked her guest to the door with a strained smile. Nathan lingered for a moment, looking at her as if he wanted to say something, but instead he only said good night. When the door closed, Lauren felt strangely relieved and anxious at the same time. Their first step into this new experience was not at all what she had envisioned. The morning began quietly. Lauren sat at the kitchen table, but her thoughts went back to last night. She tried to focus on the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, but the memories of the game, of Nathan's gaze, of his questions and his calm, confident manner haunted her. Alex walked into the kitchen, stretching sleepily and taking a seat across from her. His hair was slightly disheveled, and he held his cell phone in his hands. He smiled, clearly pleased with the night before. "You know, despite all those wine stains, it was fun," he said, turning on his phone screen. "I just texted Emily, and she suggested we get together again." Lauren froze. The memory of her eyes constantly searching Nathan's suddenly became too vivid. "Really?" she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Yeah, they seem so liberated, you know? I think we could do a lot with them." She pretended to scrutinize her mug to hide the blush that appeared on her face. "What do you think?" Alex asked, pulling away from the phone and looking at her intently. Lauren tried to smile. "I think it's an interesting experience," she answered cautiously, trying not to give away her real emotions. Alex leaned toward her. "I can see that you're a little nervous." "That's normal, but we had a good time, didn't we?" Lauren nodded, trying to suppress the mixed feelings inside. "It's just unfamiliar," she muttered. A few days after that conversation, Alex arranged another meeting with Emily and Nathan. Lauren knew about it in advance, but she couldn't suppress the wave of anxiety that swept over her every time she imagined seeing Nathan again. The day before the new meeting, Lauren received a text message. Her phone vibrated, and looking at the screen, she saw Nathan's name. Her heart beat faster. "Hi, I hope I'm not trespassing. Wanted to talk to you before tomorrow night." Lauren glanced around quickly to make sure Alex wasn't nearby, and her fingers typed a reply on their own. "Hi, that's okay. What did you want to talk about?" The screen remained dark for a few seconds. Then a new reply came. "Do you want to get together?" "Just to talk. No pressure." Lauren froze. Her mind struggled with her heart. She knew it was a bad idea, but she was drawn to Nathan in a way she couldn't explain. "Where?" An hour later, she was already sitting in her car parked outside a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Nathan was waiting for her at the entrance, his tall figure standing out against the dark sky. He was dressed simply, but he looked so confident that Lauren could barely contain her excitement. "Thank you for coming," he said as she stepped closer. "What did you want to talk about?" Lauren asked, trying not to meet his gaze for too long. They entered the cafe and sat down at a table in the corner. Nathan ordered coffee for both of them and then looked directly at her. "Honestly, I'm not sure I want to continue this," he began, and her heart squeezed for a moment. "But not because you're uninterested or anything like that. It's just that I'm not sure it's the right thing to do." Lauren nodded, realizing what he meant. "Alex seems to be all. I don't know, he's on fire with the idea. And I feel weird," Lauren said with excitement in her voice. Nathan leaned closer. "I noticed. You weren't as relaxed as Emily was yesterday." She looked away, feeling her face flush again. "It takes me a while to get used to a new partner. It's the first time for me," she said quietly, lowering her eyes to the floor. He smiled, his gaze softening. "Okay, I didn't mean to push. I just wanted to make sure you were feeling okay." Lauren felt her tension ease slightly. They talked some more, avoiding the hottest topics, but there was still tension between them that couldn't be ignored. As they left the cafe, Nathan touched her arm for a moment. "If anything goes wrong, just tell me," he said quietly. Lauren nodded, her heart beating faster than she wanted it to. Her inner voice kept telling her that this was a mistake. But as she drove home, she still couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting was inevitable. The evening when everything was going to start came sooner than Lauren expected. Alex had asked her to wear a dress he'd wanted to see her in for a long time, and he'd picked out the vintage cufflinks he usually only got for special occasions. Emily and Nathan arrived a little later than planned, but their appearance livened up the atmosphere. Lauren felt her heart race when she met Nathan's gaze, but quickly looked away when she noticed that Alex was enthusiastically offering the guests glasses of champagne. "Well, should we get down to business?" Emily asked, sitting down on the couch with graceful confidence. She looked bright, her smile almost infectious. Alex nodded, his eyes glistening with anticipation. He quickly explained the prearranged rules to everyone. No one does anything without consent, and everyone goes back to their lives after this evening. Lauren tried to remain calm, but her gaze kept falling on Nathan, who seemed to radiate confidence and calmness. When it was time to switch, Lauren held her breath and found herself in the same room as Nathan. Alex and Emily hid in another part of the house, leaving them alone. "Is everything okay?" Nathan asked softly, his voice low and soothing. Lauren nodded, trying to suppress her excitement. Their communication had been cautious, almost formal, but the electricity that had built between them in their previous encounters filled the room again. In that moment, she realized this experiment was something much more than she had expected. After their first night together, everything changed. The secret messages from Nathan became more and more frequent, and Lauren found more and more excuses to see him. Their meetings were filled with passion and tenderness, but also with an oppressive sense of guilt that Lauren tried to ignore. One morning, Alex left his phone on the kitchen table while getting ready for work. Lauren noticed in passing a pop-up notification from Emily, already waiting to see you, winky face. Her heart sank. At first, she thought it was just harmless texting, but her intuition told her otherwise. She waited until Alex went to shower, and without restraining herself, opened his phone. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The messages were explicit, filled with innuendo and explicit admissions about their relationship. "Yesterday was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. You're so thoughtful, Alex. I look forward to being alone together again." Lauren felt rage overwhelm her. She closed the phone, feeling her hands shaking. Everything was falling into place now. His cheerful mood, his late returns home under the pretext of work, and even his enthusiasm for their new experiment. Alex had been playing this game for a long time, but by his own rules. Lauren decided to take action. She contacted Nathan, who at first didn't want to believe it, but later admitted that he too had suspicions about Emily. They agreed to meet to discuss how to proceed. The next evening, Lauren arrived home earlier than usual. Alex, waiting for her in the kitchen, looked surprised. "Was something wrong?" he asked, seeing her tense face. "You tell me, Alex," Lauren replied sharply, throwing his phone on the table. "Tell me, what is it?" His face paled when he saw the open messages. "Lauren, it's not what you think, he started, but she interrupted him. "Not what I think. You're dating Emily behind my back, and that's not what I think?" At that moment, the doorbell rang. Lauren, seething with anger, hurried to open it. Emily and Nathan stood on the doorstep, their faces a mixture of tension and surprise. "Come in," Lauren said coldly, inviting them in. Alex rose from his seat, looking at Emily anxiously. "Lauren, what are you doing?" "I want to hear the truth," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "I think everyone here has something to say." A heavy silence filled the room. Emily was the first to break the silence. "Okay, I'll come clean. Yes, Alex and I used to date. It started by accident after our experiments, but—" Nathan, looking at her, interrupted sharply. "Accidentally? Are you serious?" Alex tried to intervene, but Lauren raised her hand, demanding silence. "How long did it last?" Her voice was quiet but firm. "A few weeks," Alex mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "A few weeks?" Nathan turned to Emily. "You didn't even try to tell me that?" It was like a hurricane was building up. Everyone was talking at once, accusations louder than excuses. Lauren couldn't decide whether she was angry, disappointed, or relieved that the truth had finally come out. Eventually, Emily stood up abruptly. "I think we all need time to calm down." Lauren, feeling her strength drying up, only nodded. When the door closed behind Emily and Nathan, Lauren was alone in the living room with Alex. He tried to say something, but she gestured for him to stop. "Not now, Alex. Not now." She walked off into the bedroom, leaving him alone in silence. Lauren sat curled up in the corner of the couch, staring at the empty cup in her hands. It was a gray morning, and the pale light barely shone through the thick curtains. Alex stood silently by the window, rubbing his forehead in a pointless attempt to relieve the headache caused by the tension of the previous night. They hadn't said a word to each other since Lauren had gone into the bedroom, leaving him alone in the living room. "We can't go on like this," Lauren finally said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was tired but firm. Alex turned around, his face a mixture of guilt and indecision. "I know," he answered, sitting down across from her. His voice shook, but he held her gaze. "I know I ruined everything." Lauren lowered her gaze to the cup as if searching it for answers. Her mind was buzzing with thoughts of how things had gotten this far. Their 10-year marriage had always been strong, filled with trust, but now it all seemed like an illusion. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "We made a deal, hadn't we? Everything was supposed to be open, and you betrayed me." Alex ran a hand through her hair and sighed. "I don't even know how to explain it, Lauren," he began. "It seemed simple at first. Emily was so easy-free. She didn't demand anything of me, just made me feel like someone was still interested in me." "And me?" Lauren interrupted sharply, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're not interested in me anymore? After all we've been through together?" Alex reached out his hand as if he wanted to touch her, but stopped, seeing her pull away. "No." He shook his head, his voice softer. "You're everything to me, Lauren, and that's why I should have stopped sooner. I realized it too late." Lauren rose abruptly and paced the room. Her heart was racing, but she knew she had to hear the rest of it. "Do you think apologizing is going to fix anything?" she asked, stopping by the fireplace. "It's not just a mistake, Alex. It's a wound that will take years to heal." He stood up to move closer, but kept his distance, as if he was afraid of hurting her more. "I'm willing to do anything to fix it. Anything. Just tell me what to do, Lauren." Her shoulders shook, but she stayed where she was. Anger, pain, and frustration all rolled into one. But somewhere deep inside her, there was a spark of desire to take it all back. "We need time," she said quietly, finally turning to him. "And help. Real help. We can't do this alone." Alex nodded, his eyes full of genuine remorse. "I agree. If you're willing to try, so am I." Later that day, Lauren sent a text message to Nathan. She didn't know how he would react, but she knew this conversation was necessary. He replied almost immediately, offering to meet at his house. When Lauren and Alex arrived, they were greeted by Emily. Her face was a mixture of embarrassment and guilt, but she tried to smile. Nathan looked serious but calm. "Thank you for coming," Nathan said, pointing to the couch. "I think we all need to talk about this." The room was filled with tension, and the conversation was slow for the first few minutes. Emily admitted that her connection with Alex had started as a way to distract herself from the problems in her own marriage. "It was never serious," she added, looking at Nathan. "But I realized that I've hurt everyone around me." Nathan was silent as he listened to her words. Lauren felt his eyes on her and realized that he knew how she felt about him. "How are we going to move on?" Nathan finally asked. His voice was steady but heavy. Lauren looked at Alex. "We've decided to give it a try. We're going to work on it. But it's not going to be easy." Emily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I want to try too. Nathan, if you're ready, I'm willing to do anything to get you back." Nathan was silent for a few seconds, but then he took a deep breath. "I can't promise that everything will go back to the way it was, but I'm willing to try." The next day, Lauren and Alex made an appointment for a couples therapy session. Sitting in the office, they talked honestly without accusations for the first time in a long time. Lauren realized that despite the betrayal, their relationship still had a foundation on which to build something new. Meanwhile, Nathan and Emily agreed to start small, spending more time together, avoiding excessive expectations. They realized it would take time to rebuild trust. For all four of them, this was just the first step on a long journey. But in this moment, sitting next to their partners, they felt a tiny spark of hope for the first time in a long time. Alex was still asleep, his breathing deep and measured. Lauren lay next to him, watching him. It was one of those rare moments of silence that didn't make her tense, but instead of calm, her thoughts returned again and again to recent events. Everything had changed. She could feel it in every touch, every word, every look they'd exchanged over the past few days. Their marriage was cracking like an old bridge, and although they had decided to try and rebuild it, Lauren knew that walking across that bridge would be scary. "Is it morning already?" Alex's voice snapped her out of her musings. He opened his eyes and met her gaze. "Yes," she replied, trying to smile. He reached up to brush a strand of hair away from her face. The gesture was simple, but there was a new sincerity in it, as if he was trying to remind her how much he appreciated her. "Tonight, maybe we could go out? Just you and me? No plans?" Alex suggested. Lauren looked at him and nodded. It was a small step, but an important one. They chose a quiet path in the park, where they often went in the early years of their relationship. Alex brought coffee, and Lauren held the basket of fruit and sandwiches she had packed that morning. They walked in silence, enjoying the sounds of nature, until Alex finally broke the silence. "You know, I've been thinking about how it all started," he said, clutching his cup. "About how we were both looking for something we probably shouldn't have been looking for." Lauren stopped and looked at him. "Do you think it was a mistake?" she asked cautiously. Alex thought for a moment before answering. "I think it was wrong. We were looking for something outside of us instead of looking inside." She felt his words resonate with pain, but also with truth. "You're right," she said at last. "We got too caught up in the idea that we could be someone else, forgetting who we were to each other." They continued walking, and Alex suddenly stopped and took her hand. "I want to go back to who we were, but I know it won't be easy." "It won't be easy for either of us," Lauren agreed. A few days later, they attended their first therapy session together. The office was cozy, with soft chairs and warm light. The therapist, a woman with a kind face and a calm voice, began with a simple question. "Why are you here?" Lauren and Alex exchanged glances. "We want to save our marriage," Alex said. His voice was firm but tense. "But to do that, we have to learn to trust each other again," Lauren added. The therapist nodded, and the next hours passed in honest but hard conversations. Lauren heard from Alex for the first time how he felt the moment he started cheating, and it was painful but necessary at the same time. She confessed how she felt about Nathan, too, and it was hard for both of them. "That's the first step," the therapist said when they were done. "But the most important one, you're both willing to listen and be honest." At home, it started with little things. Alex started making breakfast for her, something he had never done before. Lauren, in turn, started leaving him notes with simple words of thanks. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Alex suddenly pulled out a box of photos from their youth. "Do you remember these?" he asked, showing a snapshot from their first vacation. Lauren laughed, looking at herself in the ridiculous hat she'd bought then. "I thought I looked amazing then," she said, smiling. "And you did," he replied, his eyes filled with tenderness. Those little moments became their anchors. Lauren felt something inside her begin to thaw, but she was still afraid. When Lauren returned home one evening, she found Alex texting Emily again. His phone was on the kitchen table, and the screen was glowing with a new message. Her heart sank when she read it. "How are you? I hope all is well." Alex walked into the kitchen, and when he saw her with the phone in her hands, his face went pale. "Lauren, it's not what you think," he began. She turned to him, her eyes glistening with held-back tears. "Then explain what it is, Alex." He sighed and sat down at the table. "Emily texted me a couple days ago to see how you and I were doing. I didn't want to hide anything, but I knew you might misunderstand it." "You should have told me," Lauren said. Her voice was quiet, but you could feel the strength in it. "If we really want to rebuild our trust, it has to be completely out in the open." Alex nodded. "You're right. I was wrong." Lauren looked at him for a long moment, but then sat down next to him and put her hand on his. "We were both wrong. But if it happens again, Alex, I won't be able to keep fighting." He squeezed her hand and swore it wouldn't happen again. Later that night, they sat on the veranda, enjoying the starry sky. Alex held out his hand, and Lauren put hers in his. "Thank you for giving us a second chance," he said quietly. "Thank you for fighting for us, she replied. That night was the first time in a long time that they felt like the road to recovery was possible. It was only a small step, but it gave hope. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.